When I was a kid, I wandered out to this wild beach with its endless dunes, its screeching gulls, its magical driftwood, and I felt like I had stepped back in time to a different place. It was love at first sight. Way back in 2017, my good friend Bill Doherty, who was 90 at the time and had been coming to the Point since 1935, urged the creation of this documentary. The Point comes to us as a gift, a treasure from the past, always changing, always the same. With its endless birds and abundant sea life and the occasional old wreck that seems to arise from history itself, the Point has a strong pull on my heart. When I was a kid in the 1950s, the Point started at 110th Street and ran past the convent and by the life-saving station. Accompanied by crying gulls, we walked by dunes that seemed endless and ageless, until we reached the narrow Hereford Inlet, where a good golfer could hit a 5-iron shot across the inlet to Anglesey. But our Point moves with the slow pace of the earth. It feels solid underfoot, but it is part water and part sand and always changing. In the 1990s, when I came back with children of my own, the Point had disappeared under the waves. But with a patient will of its own, the Point has washed back in. To tell the story of the Point, we reached out to a local historian, a hometown photographer, a world-traveling biologist, the assistant director of the wetlands, a 96-year-old poet, and ordinary people who share our love of the Point.
What I saw. One spring, when the beach was wide and shallow, I saw 2 skates swimming inland in waterways at least 10 yards from the open sea. A million tiny soft baby clams crunched beneath my toes, washing back and forth with an incoming tide. And birds, dippy terns, sanderlings, thrown like bits of confetti to rush manic along the floor. Plovers laying their fragile eggs just above the timeline, trusting God and their acting skills to keep the dangers away. Self-important black-winged gulls, even the screechy laughing ones, welcome me each year as I climb over the last jetty into this special place drifting on the ocean floor.
The Point is as old as the 7-mile-long barrier island it shares, which may go back over 1,000 years. It has never supported a permanent dwelling, but it has certainly been a witness to history. To inform us of that history, we went to local historian J.P. Hand, whose ancestors arrived here over 300 years ago.
The Point is constantly changing. The sand and dunes and vegetation that makes up that special place have seen a lot of history. Here's an interesting artifact from right here in Cape May County. This is a full groove stone axe. The archaeologists tell me that it's approximately 5,000 years old. It was dredged up by a commercial clam boat off the beach somewhere north of the Stone Harbor Point. Native Americans didn't have metal. They worked strictly in stone and wood, but were able to accomplish a lot in making tools to benefit them in their world. Native Americans harvest fish and shellfish for hundreds, if not thousands of years at the point. Later, by the mid-1600s, English whaler yeomen from Long Island and New England would hunt whales and process them into barrels of valuable whale oil on that same beach and up and down the barrier islands of the Cape. Those whalers settled permanently at Cape May in the 1690s, where they farmed year-round and hunted whales in season. Less than 100 years later, many of the grandchildren of those same whalers would be hunting a different sort of prey, British merchant vessels, while serving as captains and crewmen of privateer vessels during the American War of Independence. Through the 1700s and most of the 1800s, there was little change at the point. The barrier islands were considered wasteland at that time, too unstable to build on and too vulnerable to the elements. Free-range cattle roamed there. The eastern red cedars of the island's maritime forests were harvested for fence posts and rails. Sportsmen and market hunters gunned for all sorts of waterfowl on the beach and marsh and on the freshwater ponds that dotted the pristine 7-mile beach. One event would lead to a major change to the point and all the barrier island beaches in the county. In the early 1800s, before the War of 1812 began, enterprising local merchants on Cape Island began advertising lodging for out-of-town visitors for the purpose of sea bathing. That was the beginning of the tourist trade that dominates the county's economy to this day. Cape Island, or the city of Cape May as it is known today, would change forever, while the county's beaches to the north would avoid development and remain in their natural state until close to the end of the century. For better or for worse, the locals and out-of-town investors favored the improvements, flattening the dunes, filling in freshwater ponds, clear-cutting the maritime forest, and building roads across the salt marsh to each barrier island. For thousands of years, the barrier islands were accessible only by boat. Log canoes by the Native Americans, and with the arrival of English colonists, all sorts of wooden craft, from log canoes to sailing skiffs, sloops, and schooners. With the development of the county's 5 barrier islands in the late 1800s, travel to the beach towns was first achieved by railroad lines and later by the roads that we use today. Over time, the resorts from Wildwood Crest to Ocean City expanded in a natural north and south direction, and in some instances to the west by filling in wetlands. Fortunately, the development stopped at the point, which remains undeveloped, though surely not as wild as it once was.
J.P. Hand has studied the early years of county history by reading the original journals and walking the land where he found plenty of evidence of Native American activity.
2 local roadways still exist that are ancient Indian trails. The road in front of my house up until 1948 was known as the Lenape Trail. Prior to that, it was known as the Indian Trail. On the mainland, in Middle Township, just southwest of the point, there's a stream named after my great-grandmother called Mommy Teal Creek. And just to the south of that are 2 distinct shell mounds left by Native Americans 400 or more years ago, where they harvested shellfish, oysters, clams, moon snails. Year after year, they'd harvest them in the same location and the shells would pile up. They also may have been a place where they broke up shells of our hard clams to make wampum.
Wampum was a labor-intensive process, but very lucrative, that involved breaking up the quahog shells and rounding the bits and drilling them into beads. When the colonists saw how profitable it could be, they joined in.
Jacob Spicer's journal shows that he purchased wampum manufactured by Cape May County European settlers and shipped it up to Albany, New York, where it was in turn traded with Indians in the interior.
Our beautiful and pristine point can also be a dangerous place. This is something the Indians and the colonists knew well. Storms have been coming out of the northeast even before Aaron Leaming bought 7 Mile Island in 1723. Today we can see what a simple winter storm can gobble up in a single evening. This is nothing new. All of the barrier islands up and down the coast move with storms, but also just with normal winds and tides. This shot of Google Earth time-lapse shows nearly 40 years of movement from 1984 to 2020. The point looks like the tail of a fish moving in and out. It stretches almost to Anglesey for a while and then retreats nearly to 122nd Street and is missing for most of a decade. While Stone Harbor proper is anchored by bulkheads, the point is free to move and has been moving that way for 1,000 years. One of the most famous wrecks off the point was the Guatemozen, a 200-ton ship out of New England, which got swept into the shifting sands of Hereford Inlet on a stormy night in December of 1809. This was no ordinary vessel, but a well-manned ship with an experienced captain that had been around the Cape of Good Hope all the way up to Washington State in 1803, and then across to China, where she picked up a cargo of tea and china plate.
The cargo was salvaged, as was usually the case, and much of the goods were sold at George Hand's Tavern in Cape May Courthouse, auctioned off. But a rumor persisted for decades, if not half a century, that there was gold coins hidden in the hold, a large amount of gold coins that was destined to go to Stephen Girard, the banker up in Philadelphia.
The many wrecks, the loss of life and cargo necessitated the development of a national life-saving force by the federal government in 1850. This led to the first life-saving stations on 7 Mile Island, which went up in the 1870s. Ours was originally near 80th Street, but moved in 1895 to its current location near the point, where it could more easily reach stranded ships in Hereford Inlet.
Barrier Islands. What a stodgy, heavy-footed name for those slim strips of sand that dance along the gentle curve of the Jersey coast. Nomads all. They love a home place, but resist an anchor. Shallow-rooted, they travel easily in the restless sands, back and forth along the coast.
Don Friday is a naturalist and a biologist who has worked around the world for 30 years, but always come home to South Jersey Shore. On a beautiful winter day, Bill Dockert and I met up with Don at one of his favorite places, Stone Harbor Point.
Looks like a gull got a prize down here, a little piece of a crab. Sampling the menu. And I'm glad to be here at Stone Harbor Point, which I've been coming to for over 30 years, winter and summer. It's a beautiful winter morning here. Great sky, great colors. So one of the many bird stories of Stone Harbor Point is the presence of wintering birds of prey. And as you can see, it's winter, there's snow on the ground, we've got snow in the dunes, and I would pretty much guarantee, at least for this year, that somewhere out in those dunes right now is a snowy owl, one of the most charismatic birds of prey there is. Snowy owls come south in varying numbers depending on the year, and really depends on how well they've done with their nesting up in the Arctic. If it's been a good year, if there have been a lot of lemmings, then there are a lot more snowy owls hatched, and they survive and spread southward, and this has been a good winter for snowy owls, and indeed one or more have been reported here at Stone Harbor Point. And then in addition to the snowies, there are other birds of prey that we could expect in the wintertime here, like peregrine falcons and short-eared owls and northern harriers. The snowies are here because to them the landscape mimics what the tundra looks like. It's wide, open, kind of barren, harsh looking. And they're also here because there's lots of prey. They feed on sea ducks and gulls and rabbits and other small mammals as well. The peregrine falcons that come here are feeding on other birds, especially sanderlings and other sandpipers. So there goes a red-throated loon flying by down the coast. In winter, Stone Harbor Point hosts in its waters a variety of birds, including loons and sea ducks and gannets, which are magnificent diving birds. Those birds are here for fish and shellfish, especially crabs, also mussels. Some of the sea ducks like to eat blue mussels, which you'll see attached to the jetty when the tide is down. And many thousands of those birds migrate past Stone Harbor Point every year in fall and again in spring. And quite a few will stop and take a rest and find some food and then continue their journeys. So in a few months, Stone Harbor Point will be a different place when it comes to birds, and a big part of that here is the cadre of beach nesting birds that use Stone Harbor Point. You know, New Jersey has 137 miles of coastline and virtually all of it is developed. So Stone Harbor Point is kind of an island, a sanctuary for those birds. And when we look down the beach, we see the posts, which merely the addition of a length of string become symbolic fencing put out by biologists, telling people not to enter the dune area where these birds are nesting. And they're counting on the goodwill of visitors not to do that, because if we enter a nesting area, really for any bird, we're disturbing it, we push it off its nest, and the eggs or the young are vulnerable. So come May, there hopefully will be piping plovers here, and maybe black skimmers and American oyster catchers. Really spectacular birds that we can enjoy, just can't go through the fence. Watch them from a distance, and hopefully they'll have a good year this year. Many of those birds are actually quite rare. Piping plovers are endangered. Last year in Cape May County, we were down to four nesting pairs of piping plovers in the whole county, which is a horribly low number. They didn't produce many young, and the reason is a combination of pressure from people and from predators and a lack of suitable nesting places. So a lot of people work very hard to protect those birds so that they're here now and for the future generations as well. We do have a lot of protected land in coastal New Jersey. Much of that is salt marsh, which when we look way beyond where we're standing inland to the west, we'll see a band of grasses and mud flats. Great habitat for lots of birds, but not for beach nesting birds like piping plovers. These plovers and black skimmers and other birds are programmed genetically to nest on sand and shell, to feed in the wave line. And it's very important we protect the inland habitat, the salt marsh, but that will not help piping plovers and black skimmers.
Walking the beach. I love this place. For 58 years I have felt the cooling sweep of ocean wash my feet as I walk the summer shore. Even in winter, almost my favorite time, my feet are bare. How else can I discover and pick up the beautiful whelk shells burrowing into the small sand cliffs just beneath the waves?
Dr. Lisa Ferguson is our own homegrown scientist, who as a child grew up playing at the point. After getting her doctorate in wildlife and fishery biology, she came back to be Director of Research and Conservation at the Wetlands Institute. Bill Dockery and I caught up with Lisa one lovely August afternoon just south of the observatory.
The mission at the Wetlands Institute at Stone Harbor Point is for education, is for stewardship to protect these lands and natural resources, and also for research to be able to study and learn more so we can fully value and protect this area and other areas like it. I've been coming to Stone Harbor Point since I was a small child. My memories of coming down here, it was a wild beach, rocks to climb. I learned about barnacles and, we would search the beach for all those wild things you find washed up ashore. So I really traced my professional interests and roots back to these beaches of Stone Harbor and in particular the Point. It's a place where you can come and see how these natural processes work. And it's where my interest took hold and studied coastal processes and wetland barrier island systems. And so the Wetlands Institute has always had a close relationship with the Point and been involved in work here. It's an outdoor classroom where we bring school children down to explore and learn about natural beaches. We have a stewardship program where we are out to steward this property, make sure people and wildlife are safe. And we work with other partners to make sure the beach nesting birds, which are a very important resource that use the Point, are protected and doing the best they can possibly do.
One of the projects we've been doing more recently is banding some of the birds that rely on the Point. We're putting little color bands on their legs so we can learn more about these birds. So these are important areas to be surveyed for plant life, for birds and other wildlife, and there's a lot of effort here at Stone Harbor Point to do that.
For red knots and other shorebirds during migrations and other species, there just aren't that many places left for them to stop and have the feast that they need to refuel and continue their migration. Right. And the Point is one of those places.
Bay waters, the offshore waters, and all the vegetation that's here. So from monarch migration, shorebird migration, in the spring and in the fall. You get your offshore seabirds that are phenomenal sights. We get whales and dolphins, all kinds of species that we can see just right here from the Point. So the Point is a really special place, an important spot for Arctic nesting shorebirds and other species that use it during migration. It's one of the few areas that are left where they can find ample food to fuel their migrations and little disturbance so they can eat and then continue their migrations.
So Stone Harbor Point and Hereford Inlet is also thriving habitat for marine fish. All the young of the year fish that come from the back bays and make their way offshore to marine fishes that are migrating or schooling off the coast here. And it attracts marine mammals and dolphins and birds that prey on those fish. So lots of people out fishing, lots of animals taking advantage of those fishes that are in the water. It's a great location for fish. Memory that stands out from when I was younger, coming down to the Point with my brother and taking our kayaks out just for a day of kayaking on the water and the waves. And a potted dolphin came and sought us out and started playing around our boats. They were leaping out of the water, diving under our boats, diving over the bows of our boats, as we just sat there and just took it all in. It was pretty phenomenal.
It's a place for people to come explore, and I think that's the most valuable thing, is for people to come spend time all season long, all year long. Every time you visit, it's not going to be the same as the last time you visited. You're always going to see something different.
Come to the Point. Listen. Come to the Point in fog when you won't be distracted by the sparkling of the surf or the lights of wildwood. Come to the point when the very gulls have disappeared and only muted cries reach your ears. Walk barefoot by the surf's edge and listen to the soft rush of the waves, the ceaseless dash and the slow return. Something elemental slumbers at the point, something as old and as new as the very blood in your veins. Open your heart and listen. Beyond mere words, beyond noise, listen to what your heart brings forth. There is magic here that carries us back. Come to the point. Come to your home.
The storm has passed, and here in this empty, windswept place, the sun, like the hand of God, is on my face.